Good evening, everybody from Toronto. I'm Steve Paikin. In just 9 days, we'll be voting in an Ontario election. Tonight, we're hoping to get a clear view of where the major party leaders stand on some of the important issues by debating those issues. And let me introduce you to the leaders. Dalton McGuinty is the leader of the Ontario Liberals. Andrea Horvath is the leader of Ontario's New Democratic Party. And Tim Hudak is the leader of Ontario's Progressive Conservatives. The leaders know the rules of the debate, they have agreed to them, and they've asked me to enforce them. We asked Ontarians to send us questions over the last few weeks, and we got about 1,000 of them. We chose 6, and the 6 we picked reflected those issues you wanted to see debated the most. The leaders will hear and see them for the first time at the same time you do. The first one-on-one debate will be between Mr. Hudak and Mr. McGuinty. Mr. Hudak will respond to the question first, which is about jobs. Roll tape, please.
My name is Catherine Balfour, and I'm from Pickering, Ontario. My question is about college and university grads who are forced to take minimum wage part-time jobs or even leave Ontario and Canada to find full-time employment. How would you help these grads find full-time gainful employment in Ontario?
Okay, Tim Hudak, you're up first.
Well, you know, it's tough being a young student today. You have significant debts when you're coming out of college or university and entering one of the worst job markets in memory. You know, I was at Conestoga College just the other day, and I asked the students there who are in an apprenticeship training program how many of their friends were heading out west to Alberta, Saskatchewan to get a job. And you know what? Almost every one of them raised their hands. I want to be Premier to make sure that Ontario is the best place in all of Canada to get a good job. The kind of job that'll be the ticket to the middle class where you can raise a family and buy a home, not the part-time low-wage jobs that Mr. McGuinty is taking credit for. We have a 5-point jobs plan to make Ontario #1 in Canada for jobs, particularly for our young graduates.
Mr. McGuinty, you want in?
Sure, by all means. I want to thank you very much for that question. These are very uncertain times in the global economy. And the truth is, though, that Canada fares pretty well. And within Canada, Ontario is doing quite well as well. Since January, we've created more jobs in Ontario than the rest of the country combined. You know, it's been said that we can't build the future for our young people, but we can build our young people for the future. That's why we're putting such a heavy emphasis on educating our young people. That's why one important part of our plan is to reduce tuition by 30%. That means $1,600 less for university tuition and $730 less for college tuition. The fact of the matter is we continue to create jobs in Ontario, and we've got some great plans to get us there, and I look forward to talking more about that this evening.
You know, the problem, though, is I'm hearing the opposite when I'm talking to students who are saying that it's awfully difficult to get a job no matter what the tuition may be. 300,000 manufacturing jobs have been lost under your watch. In July, Ontario lost more jobs than all the other provinces combined. So we need a change of course, one that says to young people at Conestoga, at Confederation, at Brock, or U of T, that Ontario will be the best place again to get a good job. So our plan, 5-point job plan in Changebook. And you can see it at changebook.ca. But here's the bottom line. 1, to treat energy policy as economic policy, not a social program. So businesses will have the incentives to hire and expand again. Number 2, to drain this swamp of red tape that bogs down any small business leader trying to get things done in the economy. 3rd, we're going to create 200,000 skilled trades positions by modernizing our apprenticeship system. 4, we're going to lower business taxes down to 10% to encourage businesses to hire and create jobs in Ontario. And 5th and finally, unlike my opponents, we'll give families relief, the confidence to spend in the economy again. And that's why we'll take the HST off heat, off your hydro bill, and bring in an income tax cut targeted particularly at middle-class families who are being squeezed.
All right, you may not be surprised to learn that we've got a jobs plan as well, but it's a little bit different from yours. Coincidentally, it does consist of 5 points as well. And it starts by creating the most competitive workforce in the world. We're already very close to that right now. We've got the highest educated workforce among the 34 OECD countries. We're 20% higher, for example, than the US and twice as high as the UK in terms of the number of our adults who have achieved a college, university, or apprenticeship certification. Beyond that, of course, we do want to have competitive taxes here, and we continue to lower them. In fact, we've recently lowered them for families by $355. Here's where I part company in a decided way with my colleague, Mr. Hudak. I think it's very important for us to invest in the clean energy sector. I think it's a great opportunity. I think we need to seize that opportunity. We're number one in North America now when it comes to producing cars. I want us to be number one in North America when it comes to producing clean energy technologies. That's where the world is going. I want Ontario to be there first in North America.
You know, but Mr. McGuinty, your jobs plan has been a failure. 300,000 lost manufacturing jobs. Our resource sector has been decimated. It is the most difficult job market for young people leaving school today to find a good job. And you're boasting about low-wage, part-time jobs, trying to take credit for that. Sir, your green energy jobs are nothing more than a shell game. You promised us we'd pay higher hydro rates and we'd get all these jobs and new power. Well, we got the higher hydro bills, all right, but the jobs never came, and the power is only 1/4%, despite the billions of dollars that you've sunk into it. It's not working.
McGuinty
Well, we all know,
word,
Mr. McGuinty, higher energy bills,
Mr. McGuinty's
cost
turn.
jobs.
Okay.
They don't
Well,
create.
again, you know, I part company with my colleague in this as well. The fact of the matter is that when it comes to our electricity system and our hydro bills, we have begun a major rebuild of the system. We just scraped by in the summer of 2003 because the previous government had not made new investment in new generation. So we're making massive investments in new generation transmission lines, and of course there's a cost associated with that. There is no escaping that. But when it comes to building a stronger economy and ensuring that we get international investment coming into Ontario and creating jobs here for our young people, it's very important that we have a healthy, vital electricity system in place. And to help families with that cost, we're taking 10% off our electricity bills.
That's the end of the one-on-one segment. We now bring Ms. Horvath into the mix as well. Anything here you've heard you want to pick up on?
Well, I actually want to go back to what Catherine was saying in her question, and I'm so glad that Catherine brought this question forward because it's the exact same conversation that I had about 2 months ago at the YWCA in Hamilton, when a couple of women and I were in the change room, and they were talking about the fact that their adult children had been to university. They got their degree, couldn't get a job in their field, so they went to college, got their diploma, still couldn't get a job. And in both cases of these women, their kids were working in hospitality, waiting tables, trying to pay off mountainous student debts. This is not the way that it should be in Ontario. Students deserve a chance after university, after college, and they deserve a chance without a mountain of debt on their backs. And that's why our plan is not about the tax giveaways that these guys talk about. The blank checks to companies that don't create jobs have not worked. In the last 10 years, we've given $20 billion away. Our plan: give a tax cut to the companies that create jobs. Give a tax break to the companies that train their workers on the workforce. Give a tax break to the companies that are investing in their plant and machinery, and you'll create the kind of jobs that will be there, not just for new Canadians, but for young people and people that have been laid off.
I'm not saying that it's all sunshine and apple pie, but I think it's important to take a look at the facts. And the fact is, we are the best job creator in the country right now.
Mr. McGuinty,
Since
the
January,
fact is,
since
Mr.
January,
McGuinty, the
we've
fact
created
is,
more jobs in Ontario than the rest of the country combined.
Mr. McGuinty,
June
the fact
was so
is that
good,
young
we created
people-
more jobs in Ontario than the entire United States of America.
The fact is, Mr. McGuinty,
so we are
that your
making
plan
some
is
progress.
actually failing because the biggest issue on the mind of students these days is jobs. Young people don't have jobs, and that is the problem. And you've had 8 years in office, and those jobs are not
Well,
coming to Ontario.
there
And so
was-
the question I think that Catherine asked about was, how are our young people going to get jobs? Your plan has failed so far.
There was
What
a-
we need is a change in direction. We need the kind of change that puts young people first and that puts jobs first. in this
Mr.
country.
was
Mr.
a-
Hudak and then
just-
Mr. McGuinty. Mr. Hudak.
You know, I'm sorry. I just don't know how you can say that things are going well in Ontario today. In July, we lost more jobs in Ontario than the rest of the provinces combined. August, we lost more. And I was down in Cornwall the other day. I met with a young man named Ryan. And Ryan desperately wants to be an electrician. That's what he wants to be in life. And he's working at Walmart. He's got a part-time job. At least he's paying the bills. But it's not what he wants to do. And he wants to be an electrician, and that's why our plan will create 200,000 more skilled trades positions for young apprentices like Ryan. He even has an employer, but he can't get the job with the employer because you are keeping an old apprenticeship system from the 1970s. We'll take it into the 21st century, move to a 1-to-1 ratio, and create 200,000 more skilled jobs for young people like Ryan.
If you want to get a job for Ryan, who's an electrician, then you should do what David Suzuki's doing and support my clean energy plan. It's creating thousands and thousands of jobs, and I would invite you, go visit those people working in those industries, whether you're going to London or Fort Erie or Cambridge or Cornwall or Ottawa or Mississauga or Scarborough or Sault Ste. Marie or Thunder Bay, all kinds of jobs
but the
popping
plant that
up
you went
as we
to
apply
for your
ourselves.
photo op,
There's a really
when
good
the media
opportunity
went there the
here.
next day.
I want us to be the
what was it
best
there?
in North America when it comes to producing clean energy technologies. That's
Here's-
within our grasp right now. That's where the world is going. Last year, for the very first time, more money was spent globally in clean energy technologies than in fossil fuels.
Mr. McGuinty,
The world
it's
is
good to
going
know
there.
that you've
I want
actually.
to be there
It's
first.
good to know that you've actually been to Thunder Bay recently. In fact, Mr. Hudak and I were there not too long ago, and we missed you. We missed you when we were in Thunder Bay having that debate about a week ago. But I have to say, when I go to Thunder Bay, people aren't talking about the good jobs. People are talking about the fact that 40,000 direct and indirect forestry jobs are now gone from Ontario, that you've allowed the forestry industry to collapse. In fact, I met with a gentleman in Dubreuilville. I don't know if you know where Dubreuilville is. It's not too far from Wawa. And that fellow told me that his family is now 3 generations in Dubreuilville, and because the mill is closed, because of your forestry tenure process, the mill is not going to reopen, and there is not going to be a 4th generation of his family in that town because there's nothing there for his kids. That's what Northerners are saying, that's what Northwesterners are saying about what you've done, and that's why we want to make sure that our natural resources are processed here in Ontario, giving jobs to Ontarians. That's part of our jobs plan.
Mr. McGuinty, you know the plant in Fort Erie recently laid people off. You got a bit of controversy because the solar plant you went to claim was your flagship. When the media went there the next day, nobody was working. You promised us more jobs for higher and higher hydro bills. Well, we got the higher hydro bills, but the jobs never came. You have a failed course. You've chased jobs out of the province. We can't afford Dalton McGuinty anymore. And that's why we've brought in a 5-point jobs plan to make Ontario the best place to get a good job, a ticket to the middle class, lowering taxes for businesses, more skilled trades in our apprenticeship system, and peeling back this regulatory burden that handcuffs businesses large and small. I want to get out of their way. I want to get behind them, help them create jobs, not fill out useless paperwork.
Well, you know, Mr. Hudak says he wants to create jobs. Samsung, I mean, the great news about Ontario, and there's all kinds of great news about Ontario, notwithstanding what you see, is that after California, we're the 2nd most favorite place in North America for the world to invest. So we've been working really hard to draw that investment in here. Samsung is one of those companies. They're saying they want to invest $7 billion in Ontario and create 4 manufacturing plants and 16,000 jobs over the course of 6 years.
But Mr. McGuinty,
That's something that we've got here right now. You would tear up that contract.
I don't think
your
get rid of those
your
jobs.
private
Sorry,
power
let him
deals.
finish the sentence, please, and then we'll get the other
You
two.
would tear up that contract and you would kill those jobs. That's something we've got happening here right now. One of the responsibilities of leadership is to find an opening and run through it. We know the world is going to clean energy. We know that the price of oil and gas is only going to go up. We know that the price of technologies always come down. Think of your flat screen TV and your computers. Why can't we be first at this in Ontario?
But when
Well, then why
flat
are you
screen
going straight
TVs
to
were,
nuclear? I
were
mean,
several
that's the most
$1,000s
expensive
a
technology.
year, people didn't buy them. They waited for the price to come down. It should be an affordable, competitive process. And here's the problem. You think higher energy bills create jobs. Higher energy bills have actually killed jobs in Ontario.
You know,
and
I would
other
agree with
jurisdictions
Mr.
have
Hudak
done
on
this.
that point.
For
I
every
would agree with you on that point,
For
that
every
in
job
fact-
that's created a subsidized job, 3, 4, or 5 jobs are left elsewhere. And that's why we have 500,000 women and men who'll be out on the pavement tomorrow looking for a job in Ontario. Sending
Last
out the
word in this
resumes. We
segment
need
to Ms.
change of
Horvath.
And I
course.
would
Last
agree with
word.
Mr. Hudak that Mr. McGuinty's private power deals have caused us a problem in Ontario in terms of a lack of competitiveness in the electricity system. But I disagree with both of these gentlemen when they talk about blank checks to companies that ship jobs out of Ontario. That's not going to help Catherine's child get a job. That's not going to create jobs. It hasn't done so for the past 10 years, where $20 billion has gone in blank checks. That's why tax credits for the companies that are creating jobs, investing in their plant and machinery, training their workers, reward the companies that are doing those things. Don't give blank checks to companies that are shipping jobs somewhere else.
Okay, that's the last word for question 1. We now move on to question 2. That segment was about jobs. We now have our second question. Let's roll tape, please.
Hi, my name is Majed Abu El Ella. I'm from Guelph, Ontario. My question is, how each political leader will cut government spending, by how much, and in which areas? Thank you.
Okay, this segment will feature off the top Andrea Horvath against Tim Hudak. Then Mr. McGuinty comes in later. Ms. Horvath.
Well, Majette raises a question that's on everybody's mind these days, and I think it's important to recognize that as a mom and as a person who has to balance her checkbook every single month, I know how important it is to make sure that we get rid of the deficit in Ontario, and I have a plan to do that. In fact, my plan is very upfront, very well costed, and it very clearly shows that in rolling back the wrong-headed blank checks that these two gentlemen prefer, we're going to be able to switch that investment in different ways. We're going to give families a break because I believe that the family budget is extremely important, and we're going to only reward the companies that are creating jobs and getting Ontario back to work. We'll be balancing the budget by 2017-18, but we'll be doing it in a very reasonable way, a way that's prudent, a way that's practical, but in a way that makes sure that we're changing the priorities to put jobs first, to put people first, and get our economy back on track.
Tim Hudak?
Well, Majed, you know, the problem is that we have a government today that has not set the priorities, and they're trying to be all things to all people. You know, the last 8 years under Dalton McGuinty, the economy has grown by a total of 10%. It's not a great record. Those are the facts. And government spending has increased by 80%. And I asked you, Majed, is your healthcare system 80% better? Are your roads 80% better? So much of that has been wasted and hasn't gone into the front line. So here's what we need to do. You can't run your house like that, you can't run a business like that, and you cannot continue to run the province of Ontario like that. So we'll set priorities, health and education. We'll invest more in those areas. It's the right thing to do, and find savings of 2 cents in every dollar outside of those areas.
Well,
and the other thing we need to do,
is where that 2 cent savings is coming from. I mean, I think it's important that Ontarians get an understanding from this leadership debate of exactly how you're going to achieve those savings, because it's easy to put that down on paper, but unless you're prepared to show them where the money is, they're not going to believe it. And so what the idea is, you know, give them something that they can trust in, not just promises that that don't have anything to back them up. That's why our plan is costed. It's very clear. We show very clearly how we're going to not only achieve the savings, but change the priorities, to put people first, to put jobs first, to take the pressure off small business by reducing the small business tax, to make sure families have money in their pockets again. And we do it by rolling back those wrong-headed tax cuts that both of you guys prefer. Instead, what we're going to do is reward companies that create jobs. We think that's the better way to go.
Mr. Hudak?
Well, here's the reality. It's a matter of setting priorities. Health and education will be ours. Investment will increase in those areas. We'll find savings of 2 cents in every dollar, just like families and businesses have been doing. The other thing, Majed, if we want to get out of this hole, we need the economy firing on all cylinders. We need people working again in the province of Ontario. And with 500,000 unemployed women and men sending their resumes out today, we need them working in good private sector jobs. The more people who are working, the more revenue will come into the treasury. And that's why I object to Ms. Horvath's plan that's going to increase taxes on businesses. That doesn't help. Higher taxes under Ms. Horwath, higher personal taxes under Mr. McGuinty, they'll kill jobs.
No,
I'm the only party, the leader of the party that will actually create jobs.
Let's be clear.
Through relief.
Mr. Harper is already reducing taxes, corporate taxes, significantly. And with our rolling back of the tax cut that Mr. McGuinty and you favor, we are still going to be in a very competitive position. We are going to be lower than the Great Lakes state average. We're going to be lower than Japan. We're already in a very competitive state. And by taking the tax rate back to 14%, we're still going to be very competitive with our jurisdictions that are abutting us. And we don't need to give that blank check to those companies, because for 10 years, that $20 billion in blank checks has not brought us the jobs. So let's focus and reward the companies that are creating jobs, that are investing in Ontario, that are training their workforce. And then we'll have the kind of economy and the kind of province that puts the priority on people and jobs.
Well, here's the difference. I mean, we were just in Northern Ontario, as you said, for the leaders' debate. You and I, Mr. McGuinty chose not to join us in the north. I just don't understand why increasing taxes on Abitibi-Bowater, on Weyerhaeuser in Northern Ontario, on Valley Inco, how that's going to be helpful in creating the jobs that we need in the province. I think we need
Hudak, it's not
relief.
their tax rate that's the problem. You
need
said
to
it
let
at
him
the
finish his
beginning of the
sentence.
debate. It's the electricity rates that are the problem, and I think we heard that loud and clear.
He needs to be allowed to finish his statement.
And that's how we brought forward a jobs plan to get energy rates under control, to lower taxes for businesses, and to clear aside the regulatory burden that holds businesses back, large and small. And a big difference, we need people to have the confidence to spend again to create jobs. And that's why the Ontario PC Party in Change Book will give average families relief. We'll take the HST off heat, we'll take it off hydro,
idea.
and the debt retirement charge will come off hydro as well. And an income tax cut for middle-class families who are really getting squeezed. If they have the ability to spend on hockey skates for the kids, home repair, that'll create jobs in Brampton, in Niagara, and in Northern Ontario.
Okay, that is the end of the one-on-one segment, and as I invite Dalton McGuinty to join us, I'm reminded that the question said, what government spending are you going to cut, by how much, and in which areas? That was the very specific question. Not sure we've heard an answer to that yet. Go ahead, Mr. McGuinty.
Thank you, Steve. I want to thank Majed for that very important question. And I think it's something that weighs heavily on the minds of many people around the world. In fact, the instability that's in the global economy today is not because of a lack of confidence in financial institutions. It's because of a lack of confidence in governments and their ability to manage the money. Here in Canada, we have a stellar reputation globally. And within Canada, here in Ontario, as I say, we're the biggest job producer in the country. Here are some specifics. We are reducing the size of the Ontario Public Service by 7%. That's nearly 5,000 positions. We're a little more than halfway there already. That'll save us $500 million. Beyond that, we're going to find another $200 million in savings inside our government agencies, boards, and commissions. We're also very much aware that in healthcare, there are better ways for us to deliver healthcare. And that takes me to part of our plan going forward. Instead of having our seniors, our parents and grandparents, go into long-term care homes or in a hospital setting, we should do, and what we want to do, is what they want us to do. We're going to provide more home care in the home. We're going to bring house calls back, and we're going to provide a new tax credit, $1,500 for a senior to make renovations to their home, to make it friendlier for them, safer, accessible. It might mean a ramp instead of stairs, or one of those stair lifts that takes you up to the second floor, or a walk-in, those kinds of things.
Mr. McGuinty, you actually had 8 years to try to implement those kinds of programs, and it's kind of frustrating when we have seniors right now in Ontario who have been living together for 65 years of marriage and are being told they have to go into separate long-term care homes. That's not the kind of health care, that's not the kind of long-term care solution that we need in Ontario. But I think I did answer Majet's question by saying what we're going to do is make sure that the wasteful spending of money towards giving these blank checks to corporations is going to be rolled back. That's a significant amount of room that gives us in terms of the budget. We're also going to change the priority in healthcare. Unfortunately, Mr. Hudak and Mr. McGuinty didn't support a bill that I put forward to cap the CEO salaries in the public sector. There's no way that we should have a priority being the CEO of a hospital getting his six-figure raise every single year, while a woman like Marita DeVries in London loses the nurses that help her through her breast cancer treatment. That is the wrong priority in healthcare. That's your record, Mr. McGuinty. We're going to put patients first in the healthcare system.
Back to Mr. McGuinty on this. I just don't believe, sir, that the man that brought us the e-health scandal, where $1 billion went down the drain, one of the biggest scandals in the history of the province, and a premier who was on track to doubling our provincial debt. What took 35 premiers 142 years to do, you, sir, will do during your time in office. We just cannot afford that runaway spending. So let me address a bit more Majed's question. First, I'm going to reduce the size of my cabinet. I'm going to actually start leadership at the top. My cabinet will be at least 20% smaller and more focused on the priorities of families today. And we'll also review every one of the 630 agencies, boards, and commissions in our province. Believe it or not, 630. My little girl, those of you that have a little one at home, my little girl Miller could take the fridge magnets with the letters on them, put any 3 letters on the fridge in any order she wants to, and she'll get some government agency that you've never heard of, but you're paying millions and millions a year to sustain. We'll go through every one with a very simple test. If it works, keep it. If it's broken, then you fix it. But if it can no longer justify its value to the families who pay the bills, you have to close it down.
Mr. McGuinty.
My friend, Mr. Hudak, references government spending and the deficit. The deficit is significant, and I would not deny that. But we've done a few good things working together during the course of the past 8 years. We've built 400 new schools. We've built 18 new hospitals. 6 of those were in the north. Right? We've invested in thousands of kilometers of new transmission lines, thousands of megawatts of new generation. We've hired 11,500 more nurses, 2,900 more doctors, 10,000 more teachers and the like. So that's where the money has gone. And then we were hit by a terrible recession. And we did. We joined in concert with the federal government and governments around the world. We borrowed money and stimulated the economy. We created thousands of jobs. We supported the auto sector. We referred to that as corporate welfare, but there were 400,000 jobs and they're hanging in the balance. We thought it was important to help those families. And we supported retraining programs. Now we've got a great plan to lower that deficit over time. We eliminated your deficit that you bequeathed to us back in 2003, $5.6 billion.
But Mr.
So we know how to
McGuinty,
get it done.
For all of the stats that you roll off your tongue, the people of Ontario feel like they've been ignored by you for the last number of years. Everywhere I go in Ontario, people are saying they feel that the government's taken them for granted and has not taken care of some of their basic concerns. The biggest one is the affordability of everyday life. So during that recession, what you decided to do was hit families with a new unfair tax that made life less and less affordable. You know what? I was in North Bay not too long ago, and I had the opportunity to pour a few drafts for some of my friends. And as I approached the other side of the bar where the general public was, 3 women about my age were at the bar, and we started chatting. And this woman said to me, she said, you know, Andrea, she said, I'm a mom, average mom. I'm a working woman, I've got 3 kids, and I cannot make ends meet. My paycheck is staying the same, my bills are going up, and there's something wrong with the fact that I feel insecure at this point in my life. And she's right. And that's your record, Mr. McGuinty.
Mr. Hudak.
Most people feel that way.
You know, there's a very clear choice tonight. You have 2 parties that are high tax parties. Ms. Horvath's going to increase taxes on businesses. Mr. McGuinty will increase taxes on families.
Mr. Hudak, on the contrary.
And you have 2
Mr.
high
Hudak,
government
that's not true.
spending parties. You only have
You
one
should know
party
you should know my
who will
platform
actually
better than that.
control runaway spending and focus on what's important, health and education. And if you want to get the books back in order, we surely can't stick with a government that increased spending by 80% when the economy only grew by 10%. We'll set priorities. We'll give families relief, like taking the HST off heat and hydro so they can spend again. And I will focus like a laser on private sector job creation, good jobs to get us moving.
One more comment for each of you, Tim.
Great. I want to just reinforce the notion of the support that we're providing for families. We got rid of that $5.6 billion deficit, and now we've been focused on providing relief for families. So we started by cutting electricity bills by 10%. We provided $355 by way of income tax cut to the average Ontario family. Moving forward, we want to reduce tuition by 30%. That's $1,600 a year for a family, for a student in university. That's $6,400 less for a university degree. And finally, there's a $1,500 tax credit for seniors to help them make renovations to their homes. So that's real, solid support to help families deal with their costs in the homes, where it's really important to them.
Andrea Horvath.
Mr. Hudak knows that I'm not raising taxes on families. In fact, he borrowed some of my tax reduction issues off of my agenda, which is the HST off home heating, hydro, although I'm taking it off gas and I'm going to cap gas prices in Ontario. But you know what? I'm going to follow in the footsteps of NDP premiers around the country who actually have the best record, better than the Conservatives, better than the Liberals in terms of the way they've dealt with their budgets. We have been in the deficit position fewer times than each of these parties. And in fact, when we have run deficits, they have been a lower deficit to GDP ratio. That's the footsteps that I'm going to follow in when it comes to the way I operate this province
And
when I get the opportunity.
That's the last word in this segment. We go on now to question 3. Question 3 again on videotape. Let's watch if we could.
My name is Norma Yurst from Freelton, Ontario. At the age of 69, my husband has returned to work part-time so that we can afford to remain in our home. Some of our neighbors have had to sell their homes. My question is this: what specific steps would you take to assist Ontarians like myself living on fixed incomes who are facing financial difficulties due to the rising costs and taxes on essential goods and services?
Okay, our one-on-one this time features Dalton McGuinty and Andrea Horvath. And Mr. McGuinty, you get the first word.
Norma, thanks very much for a really important question that weighs heavily on the minds, I know, of a lot of Ontario seniors. What we want everybody to do, myself included, when it comes to my own mom, is to have the wherewithal to be able to stay in that place which is really important to her, which is her home. So you've heard me reference this a few times already, but I think it's important to repeat it. We've got a brand new tax credit, $1,500, to help seniors renovate their homes in order to make them more friendly, accessible, and safe for them as they get on in years. We've also been rebuilding our electricity system. There are costs associated with that. There's no getting around that. We've just got to get it done. So in order to help all of our families deal with that, we're reducing the cost of electricity bills by 10%. We also have an energy and property tax credit specifically for seniors. It goes up to $1,100. $100. Beyond that, we've decreased taxes by $355 for the average Ontario family. My concern is that Mr. Hudak is going to be increasing property taxes by $500 million. We made an agreement with the municipalities to take that off property taxes. He wants to put that back on. Back home in my hometown of Ottawa, that means a 6% property tax hike. Okay. I don't think we can afford that.
He's going to have to wait 5 minutes before he gets in to answer that. But meantime, Ms. Horvath, it's over to you.
Well, Norma, you've raised an issue that seniors all over Ontario have been talking to me about, because on a fixed income, as the unfair HST, for example, was put on your bills, there is no way that you can make that up, except for, as you say, your husband taking another job in his golden years, which is really unfair for seniors who have worked so hard to build our communities and contributed so much already. So we're going to take the HST off home heating. We're going to take it off hydro. We're going to start taking it off of gas. We're going to make sure that we cap gas prices so that there's no unfair gouging at the pumps. But we're also going to provide extra help for seniors around the home. We have a new program that's going to provide 7.5 million hours of extra help around the home to help you do the kinds of chores that maybe aren't so easy anymore. Things like shoveling your walk, cutting your grass. I know my own mom started to feel insecure about staying in her own home because she could no longer bend into the laundry machine to do her laundry. So these are the kinds of supports that will help seniors to stay in their home. But you can't stay there if it's not affordable. So we're also uploading the download of services, the bills that are being paid off the property tax that are really provincial bills. We're going to get rid of those off municipalities, but we're going to do more than that. We are going to offer municipalities to take 50% of the operating costs of their transit systems off of their shoulders, freeze transit fares. Lots of seniors are taking transit. This makes transit more affordable and also helps with the property tax base as well.
Just to be a bit more specific to the question and to seniors. One of the things that seniors keep telling us again is they'd like to spend as much time as they possibly can and live out as much of their lives as they possibly can at home. We're going to bring back something that never should have been taken away, and that's house calls. We're going to have doctors and nurses come to your home to see you when you can't get out of the house. We're also going to invest in a major way in more home care. Nurses coming into the home and providing care on a regular basis when you need that. That's not just great for seniors, but it's great for taxpayers. It's just so much less expensive to care for our mums and dads and our grandparents in their homes than it is to have them go into long-term care homes or into a hospital setting. Now that's a smart plan, it's a sensible plan, and it's a serious plan suited to the times.
Well, and unfortunately, the status quo has not been the implementation of that plan. And we have also made a commitment to bump up the hours of home care, because we see what's happening every year. I hear it in my constituency office. People phone me up usually between January and the end of March and say, we've run out of fund. The agency has run out of funding. It's called the CCAC. They've run out of funding. They're cutting back home care hours every single week. So people who used to rely on home care all of a sudden can't even rely on it anymore. That's the record of the McGuinty Liberal government. People have to ask themselves in this election, do you want the status quo that hasn't been working for you, or do you want the kind of change that puts seniors first, that puts patients first? And that's the kind of change that you can trust New Democrats will bring.
No segment of the population has greater call upon our healthcare resources than our seniors, and that's only natural, of course. So seniors really need to see improvement inside healthcare. We didn't even measure wait times before. Now not only are we measuring them, we've got the shortest wait times in the country. We've got doctors for 1.3 million more Ontarians. So we've come a long way. We've built, as I said before, 18 hospitals. Mr. Hudak, when he was in government with his party, they closed 28 hospitals and they fired some 6,000 nurses. So we've turned things around. The next thing we want to do in healthcare, in addition to what I've talked about already, is to ensure that when it comes to children, because I know seniors are very concerned about their grandchildren too, we're going to ensure that we provide a healthy snacks program in our schools, because we're concerned about obesity levels. And we've got a new program for 6 to 12-year-olds after school to keep our kids active instead of at home, passive with an Xbox.
Horvath, the last word in this segment, and then we'll open it up.
Steve, I just want to share with Mr. McGuinty and Mr. Hudak a letter that I received from a man who was telling me that his mum was taking care of his father at the last stages of his life. He was palliative, and they brought him home. And he was on a number of life-saving devices. When she opened her hydro bill, she cried. She was in tears because she could not afford to pay the hydro bill that was come through her mail because of the extra cost of HST on hydro that this government put on people's back when they could have least afforded it. You know what is in store for you with a government that hits you with an unfair tax at a time when you're already feeling the pinch from a recession.
Okay, gotta
That's
open it
not
up.
the kind of Ontario we want in the
Mr.
future.
Hudak, come on in.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank Norma very much for the question. And Norma, I spoke with a woman in similar circumstances. Her name was Betty. I met her in Richmond Hill. And Betty said, you know, Tim, I've paid off the mortgage on my home, but I can't pay the hydro bill. I'm worried about making ends meet. And Tim, I might have to actually sell my home. That's wrong. That's not the kind of Ontario we want to see. And that's why we can't afford 4 more years of Dalton McGuinty who will increase your taxes and put your hydro bill through the roof. So here's what we'll do in our change book plan. We'll take the HST off of your heat. We'll take it off your hydro bill, and we'll take that debt retirement charge off your hydro bill as well, because families have paid more than their fair share. And here's the second thing, Norma. These time-of-use smart meters are really nothing more than tax machines on a lot of families. The only thing that seems to be smart about them is no matter how much you change your behavior, they still hit you with some kind of tax grab. We will unplug the mandatory time-use smart meters, and we'll give every family the choice, because it doesn't work for seniors who are home during the day, and not every senior can get up late at night to do the laundry. Not every family can have all the kids showered and fed and ready for school before 7 a.m. when the higher rates kick in.
Well, you know, Mr. Hudak has said this 3 times now, and he's probably said it several thousand times in the recent years. He keeps saying that I'm going to raising taxes. I'm not raising taxes. And you shouldn't keep saying that.
But we've
Hang on a second.
with all due respect,
I've asked a lot of families.
We've heard that time and time again.
I've asked a lot of families, and I know it wasn't easy for them. But the fact of the matter is we've laid a solid foundation for prosperity and growth. The fact of the matter is we're reducing income taxes for families by $355. The fact of the matter is we're reducing the electricity bills by 10%. And moving forward, we're going to do more to provide relief to families.
With all due respect,
in particular,
sir,
we're going to reduce tuition.
Nobody believes you
We're going to reduce
anymore.
tuition by 30%. Beyond that, again, we're going to provide a tax credit for seniors in their homes. You're saying that you're going to take a little bit off the HST. You said you're against the HST. Ms. Horvath says she's against the HST. Well, why are you keeping the HST? I'll tell you why you're keeping it. Because it's essential for our competitiveness. When the recession hit us, I asked businesses and economists what's the single most important thing that we can do to ensure that we grow, keep jobs, and create more jobs. And they said in unison, we have got to adopt a single value-added tax.
Mr.
We catch up to
Hudak,
140 other countries.
Mr. McGuinty, you've said you've lowered taxes, you've said that hydro bills are coming down. Sir, with all due respect,
10%.
Nobody believes you anymore. And for good reason. You're saying tonight that you're not going to increase taxes. But with all due respect, we've heard you say that not once, but twice. And you broke your promises over and over again. You brought in the HST. You brought in the sneaky eco tax. You brought in the health tax increase. Hydro bills have gone through the roof. And now you plan a smart meter tax as well. Sir, why should anybody believe you when you've broken your word time and time again?
I got to get Ms. Horvath equal time, and then you can come back.
Well, it's interesting that they talk about the HST because everybody knows that Mr. McGuinty teamed up with Mr. Harper to bring in the HST. And although Mr. Hudak made a lot of noise in the House, I think he was pretty quiet when he was could have had a chance to talk to his federal leader about making sure that the HST wasn't implemented in Ontario. And I think that we see the results of it. And it's kind of sad that Mr. McGuinty actually admits today that instead of listening to the needs of everyday people, to the 80% or more of Ontarians who said we don't want the HST, I mean, he listened to his friends on Bay Street, the same friends that Mr. Hudak's leader listened to. I think it's time that we start paying attention to the people of this province, put their pocketbook first, put their budget first, put their interests at the top of the agenda.
Mr. McGuinty.
That's what New Democrats will do.
I know that adopting the HST was not easy, but it was absolutely essential to growing a stronger Ontario economy. And since we've adopted the HST, we've created some 90,000 new full-time jobs in Ontario, according to Stats Canada. I want to return to the issue of the smart meter, something that Mr. Hudak has talked about regularly. The fact of the matter is we are moving as hard as we can in Ontario to put those smart meters on all our homes and all our businesses because they help us practice better conservation. They shift our patterns so we're using electricity after 7 in the evening and before 7 in the morning. And the fact of the matter is that's where most families have already gone. That's when we use most of our electricity, after 7 in the evening and before 7 in the morning, and that's the discount period. And it applies to 48 hours during the weekend as well. That means 2/3 of the week has a discount period for our electricity. Why have we done this? Because it means we don't have to build as much new generation. And when we don't have to build as much new generation, then it lowers our fees overall. That's why we're doing it.
Mr. Hudak?
Listen, these smart meters are no more than a tax grab, and I think you know that. Seniors are at home during the day. Let me answer the question. Let me respond to the question.
How much of the money is going to the government? You call it a tax grab.
Here's the reality.
There's not a penny of this is going to the government.
When people are getting dinged at higher rates because they dare to live a normal life, it's a tax grab, sir. I don't think seniors should be punished for doing the chores during the day. And what's a shift worker supposed to do? Take a day off so they can do the chores at home? I don't think families should be hit just because they're trying to use energy during the day. I'll end the mandatory program that's a tax grab. And let me ask you this too. Families simply cannot afford another Dalton McGuinty tax grab. You've done it over and over again, and you say it wasn't easy. Sir, the easy choice is to increase taxes. You keep doing that because you can't set priorities. The challenge for leadership is setting priorities. Ours are health and education and relief for families.
Horvath,
you took
Horvath,
easy with
and then
the
you'll get
tax.
the last word.
I actually believe that people want to do the right thing and want to conserve energy. They want to reduce their carbon footprint. They want to do the right thing by the environment. But the smart meter program didn't help them do that. People weren't able to conserve in large numbers, and they weren't able to reduce their bills. What New Democrats are going to do is we're going to take almost $1 billion of money that's sitting in a planning for a new nuclear build, and we're going to shift that to give people the tools to make green choices, retrofit their homes, a program which you canceled, Mr. McGuinty. Make sure that there's loans and grants available for those households that are not able to make those investments, because we know lots of people are having a challenge with their finances. Rebate programs to get rid of those old appliances. If we give people the tools to go green, they will. We don't believe in the stick approach that you do. We believe in the carrot approach.
Last word on the segment.
That's the change that New Democrats will bring.
I can't figure out from one day to the next where Ms. Horvath stands when it comes to clean electricity and why she doesn't put forward a plan that might be supported by Dr. Suzuki instead of our plan being supported by Dr. Suzuki.
Like the carbon
We're shutting
tax.
down coal. We're shutting down coal, which I think is so important. We reduced its usage by 90%. They told us that when we were burning coal to the max, that was the equivalent of $3 billion in annual costs to our healthcare system. Beyond that, we're creating an exciting new clean energy sector. Again, I think we should be at the front of the curve on this, not at the back. We know the world is going towards clean energy. I want us to be the best in North America at building those clean energy technologies.
You're going to bring in a carbon tax. Mr. Suzuki's a big champion. Your caucus are big champions. Families cannot afford your carbon tax. That's $500 for a typical family.
If you say that, I got to give him another word. Go ahead. We want to come back on that?
That's, just read my plan. Just read my plan.
But
I've been asked.
we read your plan last time, and you didn't carry through with it.
Just read the plan. My concern, again, when it comes to taxation, there's only two people here who are absolutely committed to increasing taxes: property taxes, $500 million, and $9 billion in business
Wrong,
taxes.
Mr. McGuinty.
They're the two.
Wrong, Mr. McGuinty.
Okay, that's the end of this segment here. We're halfway there. Here comes question 4. Roll tape, please.
Good evening. My name is Mike, and I'm from Toronto. This is a question for all the leaders. We live in difficult times that require leadership that is unafraid to talk about bold ideas, tell important truths, and ask something of the people of Ontario. I think it's fair to say that this has not happened in this campaign. So my question is this: why not? Why not talk about some bold ideas, tell some important truths, and mostly, why not ask the people of Ontario for the kind of shared sacrifice that will be necessary to take us through this difficult time?
Okay, Dalton McGuinty and Tim Hudak start this one-on-one debate. Mr. McGuinty, you have the first word.
Mike, I appreciate the question. I'm not sure I've ever been accused of not asking people to do some hard things from time to time. And we have done a couple of hard things in particular, and they're so important for us to keep doing. We're rebuilding our electricity system. There are some big costs associated with that. Give you one example. We're putting a new tunnel underneath Niagara Falls. It's 10.2 kilometers long. It's going to deliver clean electricity for 100 years. Well, it costs $1.5 billion, and it just happens to fall to our generation to get that done. We've also adopted the HST. Not an easy thing to do, but the fact of the matter is helping us catch up to 140 other countries around the world that have that kind of a tax. So our businesses, when they compete in a very competitive global economy, aren't doing so with one hand tied behind their back. Again, my colleagues here say they're against the HST, but they're going to keep the HST. And of course, we could not have done this without Mr. Hudak's support, based in Ottawa through the federal Conservative government. Now, those are hard things. We've done them. We're doing them, and it's really important that we keep moving forward because the global economy is looking for a place that is safe, secure, and stable.
Mr.
And that's
Hudak.
what we have here in Ontario.
Well, here's where Mr. McGuinty and I strongly disagree. It's not a hard thing to increase taxes. It's the easy route, and one that Dalton McGuinty has taken time and time again. And why is it that your big ideas always end up costing average families? Your big idea for the HST was a big tax grab. You put 8% more on the basics like heat and hydro. Your big idea for the smart meters has made it very difficult for seniors, for shift workers, for small businesses. Mr. McGuinty always says that we need to tighten our belts, but he never tightens his own. Government spending has gone up by 80%. He's trying to run a government that tries to be all things to all people. So what does leadership mean in Ontario today? It means setting priorities. It means focusing on job creation. So we're the best place in all of Canada to find a good job. And I'm darn proud to say that I'm the son of immigrants who came to Ontario barely speaking a word of the language. Only a few dollars in their pockets, but they believed in this province. It was a place of hope and opportunity. And as a father of a little girl, today, I'm where we're off that track. I'll make Ontario the best place again in Canada to get a good job, a ticket to the middle class, and raise a family.
A couple things on that score. First of all, I'm with Bill Davis on this. He says it's unbecoming to run down our province. He says we're the best in Canada in terms of our economy, our health care, and education, and I agree with that completely. Now, the question was about bold ideas. Well, you can't get much bolder than saying we're going to be the first in North America when it comes to producing clean energy technologies. I mean, think about what we want to leave to our children. Do we really want them to say 20 or 30 years from now, why can't anybody do anything about those international oil and gas prices? We can't. Every time we buy oil and gas here in Ontario, we're creating jobs elsewhere. Every time that we invest in clean energy technologies here and buy energy from renewables, from the wind and the sun, we're creating jobs here in Ontario for our kids. We know the world is going there. Let's get there first. At some point in time, American moms and dads are saying, we've got to stop burning coal. We've got to start buying clean electricity. And we're going to have the technologies and the manufacturing capacity in place. That's my vision. I think it's a bold one. I think it's within our grasp, and I want us to keep moving towards that.
Mr. Hudak.
The problem is it's a borrowed vision that has failed elsewhere. When other jurisdictions tried the Green Energy Act of increasing hydro bills for everybody and then handing out subsidies to a few, they found that for every job created, a subsidized job, it cost $1 million in subsidies to create that job. And then the jobs disappeared when the subsidies dried out. And for every so-called subsidized job you create, you lose 3 or 5 jobs in the broader economy. Now, let me ask you this, Mr. McGuinty. You said to Ms. Horvath, you've criticized her plan to increase business taxes. I agree. I think that will kill jobs. But if you think it's such a bad thing, why did you do it? Why in your first term did you increase business taxes just as much as Ms. Horvath wants to do today if you think it's wrong?
Well, the fact is we're reducing business taxes.
No, you increased business taxes.
We're taking
Sir,
it one
you
step
increased
further.
business taxes.
We're taking it
in
one
our
step
province.
further, in fact. Let's talk about small business, because they are the champions when it comes to creating jobs here in Ontario. We started off with a small business tax of 5.5%. We've got it down to 4.5%, and now our plan is to take it down to 4%. The fact of the matter is there is tremendous instability in the global economy. And after California, we're the second most preferred destination in all of North America to receive foreign investment. I'm not sure how, after Mr. Hudak cancels the Samsung contract, he can go to Asia, for example, as premier and say, I want to do business with you people. How can he look them in the eye after he canceled a $7 billion contract, creating 4 new manufacturing plants and 16,000 jobs at the forefront of an exciting new clean energy industry?
Quick response,
Let me
quick
respond
response.
to that. I mean, you know this is a $1 billion sweetheart giveaway that'll drive up hydro bills to go to one of the biggest multinational corporations in the world. But I want to say this. You sidestepped my question. You tried to slip away. You didn't answer what I asked you. If you think it's bad that Ms. Horvath increases business taxes in her plan, why, sir, did you do so? In fact, you increased them to 14%, costing us jobs.
I want to get back to what Mike asked.
I'd like to know why the Premier thinks it's bad for you, but it's okay for him.
I think it's time to get back to what Mike asked, and that is about leadership and how do you make the big decisions that take the bold actions. And I have to say that sometimes it's about acknowledging when you've done something wrong and changing gears to do something differently. This is the situation that both of these gentlemen continue to desire, the reduction of corporate taxes. The idea that blank checks to companies that just ship jobs somewhere else is the right track. I disagree. So I think a bold thing to do is to say it hasn't worked for the last 10 years. We've given away $20 billion and not had the jobs to come with that. So we're going to do things differently. I think it's also acknowledging that municipalities like Toronto and others, I think Mike said he was from Toronto, are struggling with the ability to pay for their transit systems, and yet we know that getting more people onto transit is a good thing. So one of the bold ideas, maybe, in fact it's something that used to be done in the past, is we're going to take 50% of the operating costs off of the backs of municipalities and freeze transit rates. That way municipalities can increase their transit systems, they can put more trains and buses and increase their routes, and people don't have to carry the burden on increased fares.
Mr.
Those
McGuinty.
are a couple of ideas, I think, that are change for the better, change that puts people first.
All right, to speak directly to Mike again, a couple of other bold ideas. We worked long and hard to secure Toyota's new auto assembly plant here in Ontario. They brought it here in about 2006. We've got a couple of thousand jobs there. And just recently they announced they're going to build their first electric car here. Well, I'm very happy for him. Beyond that as well, we're going to provide two-way, all-day GO service in the GTA and all the way to Hamilton. That's going to be great for Thunder Bay, for example, because that's where we're going to make those new,
Do you have a Buy Ontario policy
500,
that's going to make sure
those
that all
new
those
500
trains
cars,
are built in
all
Ontario?
those cars are already being made in Bombardier. So that's great news for the folks up in Thunder Bay. But it's also a way of improving the productivity and efficiency of our economy. They tell me it's going to be like taking 71 million car trips annually off Ontario roads. That's a big, bold idea. It's a multi-year plan. It's a multi-billion-dollar investment. It's bold and it's essential that we keep moving on that plan.
And it's also something that's in our platform.
Mr.
We're
Hudak.
committed to the same.
Yeah, you know, it's disappointing that Mr. McGuinty won't answer my question about why he criticizes Ms. Horvath for business tax increases when he increased the exact same tax at a time of recession. But let me tell you this. I mean, every time that you talk about any kind of jobs, there's always some big check attached. That basically meant that you taxed every other business, you taxed families, because you had to bribe businesses to come to Ontario. I see a very different approach. I want all businesses to have the chance to succeed, to hire jobs, to hire people again in our province, the 500,000, 500,000 unemployed women and men. And that's why we have a 5-point jobs plan, to create more skilled trades positions, to clear aside this maze of red tape that frustrates all kinds of business leaders, to treat energy policy as economic policy, not a social program. And we're the only party that will lower taxes to encourage spending in our economy again to create jobs.
But Mr. Hudak, it was your failed experiment in the electricity system that we're dealing with right now. The mess in the electricity system is because of the deregulation and privatization. I think you were maybe around the cabinet table when that took place in Ontario. And I have to say I'm quite disappointed that Mr. McGuinty has followed on the same route. The big expense that we have in bringing renewables into our grid is that they're all very expensive private power deals. How ironic is it that we actually have a company that's owned by the public in Korea running our renewable energy system? That should be Ontario-owned energy. That should be renewables that's in the public interest, not with private sector deals that are costing us a fortune.
Mr. McGuinty.
The facts are always helpful. This is what we're doing here in Ontario with our green energy plan. We've got 2,000 large and medium-sized energy projects being sponsored by Ontario investors. We've got 30,000 what we call micro projects being sponsored by Ontario investors. These are families, these are farmers who have decided to participate in this exciting new clean energy revolution in Ontario. They want to help subsidize a little bit of the work that's taking place on the farm or help support some modest family income. And it's this very buzz of activity that is attracting big companies like Samsung who want to come here. They're bringing, notwithstanding what Mr. Hudak is saying, they're bringing $7 billion into Ontario, creating 4 new manufacturing plants in Ontario, creating 16,000 jobs over 6 years in Ontario. That's what it's all about.
Mr. Hudak.
Well, you know, there's just a fundamental disagreement here. Ms. Horvath and Mr. McGuinty believe in handing out these expensive contracts for wind and solar power up to 80 cents per kilowatt when the price of power is 5 cents in the marketplace. But any kid who runs a lemonade stand knows you can't pay 80 cents for the lemons and then charge a nickel for the lemonade. Somebody has to pay that difference. And the problem is, it's seniors who are seeing their hydro bills increase, it's small businesses who are seeing hydro go through the roof, and families. We cannot continue on this path. That's why we'll end that expensive energy experiment and make sure that when energy is added, it's a competitive, transparent basis, no sweetheart giveaways that are driving up your hydro bill.
Ms. Horvath.
The most expensive energy experiment is the one that your government brought in the 90s. But the reality is we still have over 2,000 private sector deals that are being managed by 5 hydro bureaucracies that it's costing us a fortune. I am very committed to making sure we continue along the path of renewable energy, but I think it needs to be done in the public interest. We're going to take those 5 bureaucracies, we're going to take those over 11,000 six-figure salaries, and we're going to pare that back down, and we're going to put an electricity system back together that's in the public interest. That will get our rates down, and that will make Ontario competitive again.
Mr. McGuinty.
A couple of points, if I might. Number one, I'm not saying that the hydro companies are perfect, but in fact, they've got one of the best histories in the world at ensuring that over the progress of time, during the course of our history, we always had a reliable supply of electricity. And I'm very, very proud of that. Beyond that, I want to say once again, there's a lot of instability in the global economy. After California, we're the second most favored place in North America that's drawing in foreign investment. So you can't go around, as Mr. Hudak is proposing, and cancel these big international contracts. That's going to send a shockwave through the international investment community.
Did you just cancel one in Mississauga?
We've got to make sure that
Dalton,
we continue to
cancel a contract in Mississauga just on the weekend?
So that we can expand our economy, we can enjoy more prosperity, and create more jobs.
You want to try that again?
I'll try that again. You say you can't tear apart contracts. Sir, you just canceled an energy contract in Mississauga.
No, we didn't.
One that you said was
No,
you
we
were
didn't.
champion for 6 years.
No, we didn't.
And then 11 days before Election Day, you said, well, all of a sudden, you're against it. I mean, this looks like a government that's run out of ideas and it is on the run. So how much exactly, let me ask you, how much money are you going to throw into that pit in Mississauga for your last-minute flip-flop?
We said that we would relocate.
So where's it
and
going to go then?
I said that a moment ago.
So where will it go?
We have
At what cost?
2,000 big and medium-sized projects and some 30,000 small projects. So you put these in place and you try to anticipate to the best of your ability where you're going to need the new electricity and when you're going to need it. In Mississauga, this is a specific case where during the course of the past 6 years, things have changed. So we've listened to the community. Right beside the location, there are now 3
What's changed is there's an election on the horizon.
condominium towers. And we have a new rule in place that says we couldn't even locate one single emissions-free wind turbine in that site. So it doesn't make sense to me if we couldn't even put up one wind turbine to put up a gas plant. So we're listening to the community. I think that's the important thing to do.
As Andrea just said, so
I think
what
leadership
exactly
involves
has
in part listening to
changed?
the community, and now we're going to relocate it to a place that makes sense.
So suddenly something changed 11 days ago. I think Ms. Horvath had a great line there. The only thing that's changed, sir, is there's an election campaign, and you abandoned a policy that you championed for 6 years. So I'll ask you again, where are you going to move it to? How much is it going to cost Ontario families? And what, aside from an election campaign, changed in the last week and a half?
Mr. Hudak sees it as a failing to listen to people. I don't. I think leadership in part consists of listening and learning. We've made an adjustment. A lot has happened in the past 6 years. 3 condominium towers have grown up around the site.
I'm listening to the executive producer who says it's time to move on. Question 5 on videotape, and then Tim Hudak gets the first answer, debating this one-on-one with Andrea Horvath. Roll tape, please.
My name is Mohammed Zaman, and I live in Ottawa. Post-secondary education is one of the most important milestones in a person's life. This year, close to 90,000 undergraduate students are heading towards this path despite the enormous financial commitment required. Many students find it difficult to pay for the cost of their education, never mind their cost of living. My question to the leaders tonight is, what will your party do to help post-secondary students throughout this critical but expensive academic endeavor?
Tim Hudak, you're up first.
Well, thank you for the question, Mohammed. You know, there's no doubt that post-secondary education is the great equalizer in our society. I mean, it helped my dad, who is a son of immigrants, escape a low-income family. Became a high school principal in the Catholic system. My mom came from a very modest background as well and became a teacher. And therefore, I came from the middle class. We need to make sure that every student who has the grades to qualify can get post-secondary education, because you know, a university degree, a college diploma, a trade will be the ticket to a good job in the middle class. And the second thing I'll say, Mohammed, we need to make sure there are good jobs out there when you graduate. So I'm hearing from young people all across the province that the jobs just aren't there.
Andrea Horvath.
Well, Mohammed, I'm really happy that this question has come up. I was just in Ottawa not too long ago and had a very strange thing happen to me. I was about to get into my OPP vehicle, and this young woman approached me on the street. I was quite surprised, and she gave me a big hug, and she said, "Thank you." And I said, well, what for? And she said, well, I'm a part-time student. And she said, in your plan to freeze tuition fees and to take the interest, the Ontario interest off the OSAP loan is going to make a big difference for me. It's as a part-time student, freezing those tuition fees is going to make a difference in terms of how much I'm going to be paying to get my education, because I can't afford to go full-time. I have to work and go part-time, so that freeze is going to make a big difference, and taking the interest off is going to mean that I'm not going to be paying as much over time. New Democrats have been listening to students. Right now, we have the highest undergraduate student debt in all of Canada. We have the second highest debt for graduate students. This is not a province that puts students first. In fact, we actually have the least per capita investment in post-secondary education. That's not the way that students are going to earn their degrees in a way that doesn't leave them with debts the size of mortgages when they graduate. We are very committed to making sure that post-secondary education is achievable for more people, and that it's not a financial barrier.
Here's another thing, Mohammed, we're going to do to help out young people trying to get into post-secondary education. You know, so many middle-class families are being squeezed out altogether. Under the current system with Mr. McGuinty, if you're $60,000 to $70,000 in income, they say you're too rich and your parents are too well off and you don't get any assistance. I think that's wrong. In fact, I'm going to increase assistance through OSAP to help more and more middle-class families. Now, it's not a grant, it's a loan. You have to pay it back, but it opens up access. And let me tell you how I'm going to pay for it as well. In a time that students are facing big debts and a tough job market, Dalton McGuinty chose to create a $30 million foreign scholarship program. $40,000 scholarships only for foreign students. So, Mohammed, if you applied for that and you had an Ontario driver's license, you'd be disqualified. I think that's wrong. I'll put Ontario's best and brightest first. I'll cancel that program and put it towards OSAP for Ontario families.
But the problem is, Mr. Hudak, that encouraging people to take more and more and more debt load on doesn't address Mohammed's issue, which is tuition fees are already too expensive. Freezing tuition fees will stop that climb. And instead of a rebate program which Mr. McGuinty favors, we're going to freeze fees. That means everybody is able to gain from having lower tuition fees over time. I think that students need a break. I know that they need some hope for the future, and I know that there are lots of people in my own riding who are actually choosing not to go to post-secondary because the debt load is daunting. And so our plan is one that responds very much to what students like you, Mohammed, have said, which is that something needs to be done to reduce the amount of debt that students are facing, to help give them a bit of a break, and to make sure that jobs are there for them when they graduate. And that's the other part of our plan. We're going to reward the companies that create jobs for everyone, for new Canadians, for students, for people who have lost their jobs in the economy. These are the kinds of priorities that will help students not only with their debt loads, but to get jobs as well when they graduate.
That's the end of the one-on-one here. We can now open it up to all three. Mr. McGuinty, you want to come in?
Thank you. Ms. Horvath, just so we're clear, is offering a freeze. Our plan calls for a 30% reduction for families with incomes of $160,000 or less. Again, that's $1,600 off university tuition, $730 off college. Mr. Hudak is suddenly interested in education. Now, it may be that at some point in time along the way, and I've been at many question periods with Mr. Hudak, that he asked me a question about education, but I can't recall a single one. We've got a great record here in Ontario when it comes to post-secondary education. We've created 200,000 more spaces. Our plan now calls for 60,000 more. We're going to build 3 new, exciting, innovative undergraduate university campuses. If you compare Ontario to the rest of Canada, The enrollment in Ontario universities and colleges has gone up since 2003 by 26%. That's twice the pace it's gone up in the rest of the country. So families are making heroic measures, making heroic efforts in order to get young people into college and university. That's why we're going to help them with our 30% tuition reduction.
Mr. Hudak.
Dalton, you know that's not true. I've asked you many questions about education. One in particular was why, at a time that the students are facing significant debt, they're having trouble finding a good job in Ontario today, that you would choose to spend $30 million on a foreign scholarship program that would tell to young men and women here in the province of Ontario they need not apply simply because they're Ontario residents. I disagree, and I'll put that money into OSAP assistance for families instead. And here's another difference between myself and my two opponents. We're going to focus on modernizing our trades in the province. We're going to create 200,000 more skilled trades positions. If you want to be an electrician, a carpenter, a welder, a plumber, right now you're heading down the road to Saskatchewan, to Alberta, because Dalton McGuinty is clinging to an old 1970s-based apprenticeship system. We'll help the colleges identify young apprentices, put them in jobs, and create 200,000 more skilled trade positions.
Ms. Horvath.
So Mr. Hudak simply favors giving more loans out and increasing student debt. Mr. McGuinty says that he's going to allow tuition fees to continue to climb, and so that after a couple of years, that 30% is going to be wiped out anyways. New Democrats think both of these are the wrong ways to go. We need to make sure that students in Ontario are able to afford a post-secondary education, and you can only do that over time by freezing tuition fees and making sure that opportunities are there for all students. That's our commitment. That's the kind of thing that changes the way these two people are talking and puts students first in Ontario.
Mr. McGuinty.
I just want to come back to something that Mr. Hudak referenced. He says he doesn't believe that we should provide any scholarship support to foreign students. The fact of the matter is that foreign students who are coming to Ontario today are spending $1 billion annually. They're helping subsidize university and college education for all Ontarians. He says he doesn't like Samsung in part because it's a foreign multinational. During the course of the campaign, he said that he called Canadian citizens foreigners.
Oh, hold on a second here. No, Dalton, you know that's not at all true.
I think it's really important for us here in Ontario to embrace globalization and to understand who we are. We're together. We're in this. We're tight. We've found success over the course of our history by moving forward together. So I just know I'm not comfortable. I've got to tell you, I'm not comfortable.
Well, hold on a second. No, let's hold on a second here.
Foreign
what the reality
students,
was.
okay, foreign multinationals and foreigners.
Point made. Let's go.
Here's the reality, and I know you want to say anything to not talk about your record in lost jobs, your record in raising taxes on families. The reality was, I never said that. The reality is you brought in an affirmative action subsidy of $10,000. Initially, your campaign chairman, the president of the Liberal Party, your finance minister said that was to attract foreign workers. Then you backtracked and you said, well, it's for people who have lived in Ontario for 5 years or less. Here's where I stand.
We're talking about
Canadian value
citizens.
that it doesn't matter how long you've lived in Ontario, whether it's 6 months, 6 years, 20 years, or for your entire life. We should all be treated equally. An equal chance at a job based on how hard you want to work, your skills and your experience. Not a $10,000 affirmative action check for a select few. Give everybody a chance to compete. And the Premier's job, with all due respect to Mr. McGuinty, is to create jobs for everyone, to move our economy forward so we all have a good shot at a good job, not a special $10,000 handout.
Ms. Horvath.
And I think when the tenor of the discussion sinks to this level, we lose sight of what Mohammed was talking about. And that's, I think, the most unfortunate thing that I've seen in this campaign so far is the hurling of accusations and insults when we should be focusing on how we make Ontario a better place, where people come first, where students come first, where jobs come first. And I'm saying to Mohammed and to all of the other students who I've talked to over the years who have said to me, we have to get a handle on tuition fees. Ontario should not be 10th out of 10 when it comes to per capita investment. We shouldn't have the highest undergraduate debt load. We shouldn't have the highest, second highest graduate costs. That is the wrong way for the province to go. So if you want the kind of change that puts us in a different direction, choose New Democrats, because we believe students should come first.
Mr. McGuinty.
Well, just to again relate a few facts. When it comes to post-secondary education in Ontario, as I mentioned a moment ago, we've got the highest growth that's been experienced across the country. But in addition to that, we now have the lowest student loan default rate ever recorded in Ontario. We brought back grants. Ms. Horvath's party, when they were in power, they eliminated grants. We've also capped student indebtedness
Isn't
at
that guy your federal leader now?
$7,300 per year. That means that if you borrow money from OSAP, doesn't matter how much you borrow, you're not going to owe more than $7,300 every year. So we've done a lot to ensure that there's more affordability and more accessibility. You know, this is personal to me. My grandmother was married at the age of 16. She didn't even go to high school. The reason that I'm standing here this evening as Premier of the greatest province in the best country in the world is because of educational opportunity. That's why I'm so committed to ensuring that all our young people have equal opportunity to an affordable, good quality Ontario post-secondary education.
The bottom line for Mohammed, for students across our province. There's no doubt it's expensive in the post-secondary system. That's why I'm going to increase access to OSAP to help make sure that we all have that opportunity, that great equalizer that's a degree, a diploma, or a trade. Here's the difference between the Ontario PCs and our Change Book plan and my opponents. We have an unrelenting focus on job creation, to make Ontario the best place in Canada when you graduate to get a job. And you know what, Mohammed? I've been there. I remember coming onto the economy with my university degree. I was stacking beer at the duty-free store. It was a job, I was paying the bills, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. I will fight each and every day for our young people like yourself, Mohammed, to have a good job, to keep that great talent here in Ontario.
Okay, leaders, that is the end of the fifth question. This is the last question of our debate this evening. The polls tell us all the time the number one issue out there is health care, and that's what this question's about. Roll tape, please.
I'm Bilal Vakani. I'm from Burlington, Ontario. I'm also a student at Ryerson University. My question is, there is already limited privatization in our healthcare system. Would any of the party leaders consider a larger role for the private sector in healthcare delivery?
Okay, the one-on-one this time features Andrea Horvath and Dalton McGuinty. Ms. Horvath, you go first.
Well, Bilal, I think that the healthcare system needs a lot of improvement. I think by changing the priorities that we have now, we can bring back to Ontario the kind of healthcare that people expect, the kind of healthcare that makes sure that when a mom goes to an emergency ward on a Friday night, she's still not there sometime Saturday afternoon with her child. We need to change the priorities. We need to make sure that we are putting investment into long-term care, because you know what? It costs $1,200 for a person to stay in hospital when they could be in long-term care for about $160 a day. And in fact, with home care services, it only costs $60 a day. So we think that there's a lot of work to be done to change our priorities. Do I think the priority is to add extra profits into the system? No, I do not believe that that's the way to go. I do believe that we need to cap the salaries of CEOs in hospitals. Unfortunately, right now, the priority is that those CEOs get their six-figure salaries while we see nurses being laid off and emergency wards being closed. So a combination of changing priorities and investing in programs like long-term care, like home care, like our new housekeeping assistance program for seniors.
We'll have a chance to get into this some more.
Difference.
Mr. McGuinty?
Great. I want to thank Bilal for that question, and I think it's a very, very important one. And that is, it has to do with the future of our public health care system, Medicare. And there's going to be an important event coming in the not too distant future. The Premier of Ontario is going to have to sit down with the Prime Minister of Canada and 12 counterparts from across the country and hammer out a new health accord. I was there back in 2004 when I hammered out that accord with then Prime Minister Paul Martin. It wasn't easy. There was some pushing and some shoving, but in the end, we succeeded on behalf of Canadians and indeed Ontarians. The plan at that time was to ensure that we worked within Medicare and to ensure that we reduced wait times and provided more access to more doctors. Here in Ontario, we've enjoyed the greatest success of all. We now have the shortest wait times in the country. Hips and knees and MRIs and CTs and cancer and cataract care, we have the shortest wait times in the country. We've also ensured that 1.3 million more Ontarians now have a family doctor. But this is the important point. I want Ontarians to ask themselves, who do you want sitting at the table with Prime Minister Harper when it comes to standing up for public health care in Ontario? I'm not saying that public health care is perfect, but I think there's all kinds of room for exciting innovation inside public health care.
Ms. Horvath?
And that's where I intend to be.
Well, I think that it's clear that Mr. McGuinty's not talking to the same Ontarians I'm talking to. Everywhere I go, Ontarians are telling me that they're watching their healthcare system erode before their eyes. And whether it's the Anzavino family in Fort Erie who had a daughter in a car accident and that woman had to travel past 2 closed emergency wards before she could get treatment, and she didn't make it. This is the kind of healthcare system that people in Fort Erie and Port Colborne are dealing with, along with a number of other smaller communities that are having their access to emergency wards closed. We see women who are taking breast cancer treatments who are losing their nurses. CEO in the London Hospital got his raise that year, but the nurses got cut out from helping women cope with their breast cancer treatment. The kind of healthcare that we have in Ontario is not the rosy picture painted by Mr. McGuinty. What people are telling me very clearly is there needs to be a lot of improvement. We have wait times in emergency rooms that are beyond the pale. This is a promise that Mr. McGuinty's made in the past. My own son ended up with a skateboard accident several weeks ago. He went to an emergency ward in my community. They didn't do anything for his fractured elbow. They sent him home, said it doesn't really need anything. They can't afford a cast, and go home and somebody will help you figure out how to put a sling on it. That's not the kind of healthcare Ontarians deserve. We need to improve our healthcare system, and we have the plan to do that. The question is, who do you trust to actually start making the changes that put people first and put patients first?
First of all, I hope your son is well. Secondly, I don't think that's a fair representation of the quality of healthcare services provided by our hardworking doctors and nurses and technicians and administrators across the province. The fact of the matter is we put a lot more money into healthcare. We've built 18 new hospitals. We've expanded some 100 others. We've got more doctors and nurses. We've got a great new collection of doctors and nurse practitioners and nurses and dietitians that we bring together called family health teams. We didn't have any before. Now we have 200, and they're caring for 3 million patients. We also have the first nurse practitioner-led clinics in North America. We're putting 25 places here in Ontario. So we're doing everything we can that reach further into our communities and provide still better quality health care. The next challenge for us is emergency room wait times. We're at the forefront of Canada. National experts have said Ontario's right up front, leading on this score. It's not an easy thing to do, but we are in fact getting those wait times down in our emergency rooms right now.
Okay, that brings the one-on-one to an end. We now open it up to include Mr. Hudak, and I remind everybody that the question was about whether there's a larger role for the private sector in healthcare. Mr. Hudak.
Well, I want to thank Bilal for the question. And you know, when it comes to healthcare, for me it's personal. I'm 43 years old. I've been lucky. I've had good health. My little girl Miller, not so much. She was born early, spent a lot of time at women's college. And then recently this summer, she was in the hospital for 26 days at Sick Kids. And I saw how hard our nurses are working. I saw how hard our doctors are working, and they're run off their feet. And they say, can't there be a better way? And that's why in our Change Book plan, we'll invest $6.1 billion into our healthcare system. It will be our #1 priority to support our nurses, to recruit more doctors to our province and encourage them to go to underserviced areas, to build more long-term care beds, in fact 40,000 long-term care beds in our province, and to make sure that we invest in home care and put the patient, not the bureaucrat, not the fancy consultant that got rich off of e-health, we'll put the patient at the center of our healthcare system.
Ms. Horvath.
Well, and I think the thing that frustrates Ontarians, and it certainly frustrates me, is when the Premier, talks his game about all the investments, the problem is that people are not experiencing improvements in their healthcare system. And so you have to ask yourself, what is going wrong? If all of this new money is being poured in, then there's obviously a problem because it's not reflecting in people's confidence that their healthcare system is going to be there for them when they need it. That's certainly the experience of Marita DeVries. That was the experience of the Anzavino family. That was the experience of my own son. That's the experience of the couple from Sudbury who after 65 years of marriage are being told they have to go into separate long-term care homes. Look, the more profit you build in, I'm going to be really frank with Bilal. I don't believe building more profit in is the right way to go. And unfortunately, both of these fellows seem to have that kind of a preference. I don't. I think we need to make sure that we're investing in the kinds of services like long-term care, home care, keeping seniors safe at home, frontline services, not CEO salaries at the hospital.
Thank you. First of all, with respect to our commitment to Medicare, you will know that we're the only province that on our watch put in a specific piece of law which commits Ontarians to the future of Medicare. That's the name of the very bill. itself.
What about home care, Mr. McGuinty?
Well, when it comes to home care, Ms. Horvath, you will know that our commitment, our plan calls for an investment three times the size. But here's my concern.
Private sector
Here's my
delivery
concern.
model, and you know
here's
that.
my concern.
When it used to be largely not-for-profit and public.
Mr. Hudak says that health care is his #1 priority. A moment ago he said education was his #1 priority. But here's my real concern. Mr. Hudak has not had his plan costed by an economist. He's had no independent verification brought to bear on his numbers. Well, we've looked at his numbers. In fact, there's a $14 billion shortfall.
Hold on
That's
a second.
twice the size of the previous PC government's shortfall.
You know that $14 billion
And remember what happened back then? They
accurate.
closed 28 hospitals. There was war in our schools. We've moved beyond that. We haven't had a single strike in our schools in 8 years. Class sizes are down, test scores are up, graduation rates are up. Our kids are doing better than ever before. And when it comes to health care, again, I say to Ms. Horvath, I know the system is not perfect, but the fact of the matter is we are making real progress.
Okay, Mr. Hudak gets a chance to respond.
Dalton, you know that your allegations about this whole have been discredited. And if you disagree with it, then why did you adopt the exact same numbers we have for revenues, for health, for education? And if your numbers are so great, why did you have 2 sets of numbers in the last 3 weeks? Here's our plan when it comes to healthcare. We'll strengthen our public, universally accessible healthcare system with an initial investment, $6.1 billion through our mandate. It will be our #1 investment priority. And, you know, we see these ads from Mr. McGuinty on TV, where he claims that things are going so well in healthcare. I just didn't hear that from nurses, from doctors. I don't hear it from patients. And there's really one word we need to remember: e-health. $1 billion that went down the drain, that went into the pockets of fancy consultants who then chose to bill taxpayers for their chocobites and their tea. Sir, the $1 billion in e-health could have built 4 hospitals by now.
A response from Mr. McGuinty, then Ms. Horvath.
By all means, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the whole issue of e-health because my colleague, Mr. Hudak, has been engaging in a fanciful fiction. I just want to quote back to him the words of the Auditor General because I think they're pretty important when it comes to these things. He talked about the $1 billion, and in fact, he was once asked at a press conference about that $1 billion all kind of evaporated, as Mr. Hudak would have us believe. He said, that money is going to turn out to benefit taxpayers. The fact of the matter is this investment in electronic health is very important to all of us. So far, we have electronic health records for 7 million Ontarians. By the end of next year, we'll have those records for 10 million Ontarians. We're getting rid of, in fact, we've gotten rid of all the film that used to be used in our hospitals so that when they move information from one department to another, it's now done digitally. More than that, we're now ensuring that we can move that information from one hospital to another, one part of the province to another. So notwithstanding Mr. Hudak's disparaging commentary about our electronic health system, we are in fact getting good value for this, and it's really important that we keep moving forward with it.
Ms. Horvath.
I'm going to go back to Bilal's question and state very clearly that I am 100% behind a public healthcare system, one that puts patients first, and Ontarians, I think, are with me on that, and they have to ask themselves a simple question in about 8 or 9 days' time. Who do you trust to keep our public healthcare system in shape and there for you when you need it?
Mr. Hudak.
Mr. McGuinty seems to think that e-health was a big success. I just don't think families believe Dalton McGuinty anymore. $1 billion. They could have built 4 hospitals. We had consultants charging $2,800 a day and then billing for their tea on top of that. And then Mr. McGuinty's government wanted to give the e-health bureaucrats a merit pay increase for one of the biggest scandals in the history of our province. Let me tell you one more thing, too, Bilal, of where I disagree with Mr. McGuinty. He's created these regional health bureaucracies called the LHINs, basically a bloated layer of middle management that gets between the Ministry of Health and doctors and nurses and the patients they're trying to care for. $300 million to date sucked into this bureaucracy where people don't spend a single minute with patients, they don't do any surgeries. As Premier, I will close the doors on those wasteful LHINs and put every penny into patient care instead.
We got a minute left here, so 30 to each of you, please.
All right,
Mr.
on the matter
McGuinty.
of LHINs, I just want to simply quote Conservative Senator Dr. Willie Keon, one of the foremost cardiologists in Canada. And he said this with respect to Mr. Hudak's proposal to eliminate our local champions in LHINs. And I quote, "This would be the stupidest move I've ever heard in my life. It would undo years of progress." LHINs manage health care within the community. They establish priorities. That's why they're so important to all of us in our hometowns.
Andrea Horvath.
New Democrats, if I become the Premier of this province, will make sure that CEO salaries are capped and that money is invested in patient care. I'm going to get rid of the wait lists for long-term care and home care. I'm going to add a new program to help seniors stay safe in their homes so they can stay in their homes longer. And I'm going to cut emergency wait times in half. And I'm going to proudly do that in the context of a public healthcare system.
Okay, leaders, that is our time for the official debate tonight. But according to rules, you each get to make a closing statement. And we have drawn lots, and Dalton McGuinty, you get to go first.
Thank you, sir. When a global recession hit Ontario, it hit us hard. So we rolled up our sleeves and we got working together. We invested in new jobs. We invested in job retraining. We came to the support of the auto sector because there were 400,000 jobs at stake, and we helped that. We helped those people. The fact of the matter is the economy is turning around. We are on track. We are headed in the right direction. We're now the #1 producer of cars in North America. We're the #1 producer of jobs in Canada. But there's still a lot of uncertainty in the global economy. The last thing we need to do is raise taxes on our job creators by $9 billion. And the last thing we want to do is start canceling international contracts when we're trying to secure new international investment here. We've got a smart plan. It's a sensible plan. It's a serious plan. It's suited to the times. I hope you'll see it that way. I ask for your support. I thank you for tuning in tonight.
Tim Hudak.
I want you to ask yourself, first, thank you, Stephen, and to my two colleagues and folks for listening in and watching tonight. Ask yourself, can you afford 4 more years of Dalton McGuinty? Particularly if there's storm clouds on the horizon. We saw what he did last time. He increased taxes on families despite promising he wouldn't. He increased taxes on business and drove hydro bills through the roof. That weakened Ontario at our time of need, and we lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs as a result. We need to chart a different course. I want to see Ontario that is the best place to find a good job. Our plan will create jobs in our province. We'll give families relief and get government focused on the basics, health and education. If you want that kind of change in Ontario, I ask for your support for your Ontario PC candidate on October the 6th. Thank you.
Andrea Horvath.
I want to thank the 6 people that we heard from today, as well as the 1,000 or so that submitted their questions. You really hit on what's on the mind of most Ontarians, and I appreciate that. I think that it's important to acknowledge that there's a big choice to make on election day. You can choose the status quo that hasn't been working, or you can choose a party that's going to put patients first, that's going to put jobs first, that's going to put the affordability of everyday life at the top of the agenda. New Democrats are offering the kind of change that does exactly that. So your choice is a very important one, but it really is a simple one. You can choose one of the same old suits, or you can choose the kind of change that puts people first. I ask for your support on October 6th to change this province. Thank you.
And that ends our time in this debate. I want to thank the leaders for taking part. I want to thank you for watching, and we hope that you will go out to vote on the 6th of October. I'm Steve Paikin. Good night, everyone.